Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. It's been a tumultuous time since the collapse of the Du Val property development group. It was August last year we saw police raid a Remuera property, leaving with a number of assets owned by Charlotte and Kenyon Clarke. Since then, it's been a tsunami of court hearings, social media posts, and he said, she said. On Monday, a new podcast called The Fall of the House of Du Val launches on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. But today on The Front Page, host of the podcast, Business Desk's Slade is here with us to take us through the rise and fall of Du Val. So, Maria, we often hear about the collapse of property developers, I suppose, but what do you think makes the Du Val story so different?
The big thing is that they're in statutory management, and a lot of Kiwis won't know what that is.
Yeah, I was about to say, roll it back a little bit.
It's a very rarely used tool. The last time we saw it in this kind of situation was with the collapse of the South Canterbury Finance Group, and that was 15 years ago. So it's not something that happens on the regular, and there's a lot of professionals out there, accountants, lawyers, who've never seen it in their careers. It's like a unicorn. So this is a process where the government steps in effectively and takes over a business, and they do so because there's a very complex situation, a lot of people have been affected, and there's potential crimes that may have been committed, and so they see fit to step in and run the business. And it's such a big deal that the Governor-General has to sign off on it.
Wow.
So this is what happened with Du Val. And this was a ordinary townhouse apartment developer in South Auckland. So not something that you'd think would attract a lot of attention under normal circumstances. But it was a very complex group. There are 70 entities that are in statutory management, and there's this whole process now going through where PwC, one of the big four accounting firms, they're in charge. So they are unravelling the whole Du Val group. And in a parallel kind of thing that's going on is the Financial Markets Authority, who's our financial markets watchdog, the regulator. They are investigating Du Val, and we don't know the outcome of that process yet. So it's very complex. $268 million lost is the estimate at the moment. A lot of investors who've lost money, tradies that are out of pocket, the IRD's out of pocket. So there's a lot of things to unravel about what happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of victims or even just people that it involves and touches, have we any idea how many people that involves?
We know there's something like 134 investors. Yeah. So it's actually not a big number, but they have lost the better part of 64 million.
Oh, wow.
So that's quite a bit of money. PwC in their latest report, they say that they won't see most of that money ever again. There's maybe about 4 or 5 million that will be recovered. So those people are really out of pocket. But perhaps more importantly, it's the way this group was structured, and they were not the only ones. What happened was we saw a new breed of property developers and investment companies that came through because we had this massive property boom, as we know, during COVID. And they were making the most of kind of an exclusion in the law. So they were offering what's known as wholesale investments, which are unregulated. So that's not like your term deposit. You go down the bank and, the bank has to abide by all sorts of disclosure requirements and regulations.
Make sure you can get the money back.
Absolutely. Wholesale investments are in a category of their own, and they're really meant for people who can stand to take the risk. And there's two ways you can become a wholesale investor. One is you're wealthy, and there's a set of wealth criteria, or you can be an eligible investor. And that's when an accountant or a lawyer or a financial planner signs off a certificate for you that says, yep, you know what you're doing, you've got enough experience. And so this new kind of sector of property investment companies was making the most of that exclusion, and the Financial Markets Authority was really concerned that it was being abused, and these investments were being offered to people that it was inappropriate for them. They were just ordinary mums and dads, and they shouldn't have been taking on such high-risk investments. And so the jury is out as to whether that happened, but the FMA has taken a bit of action regarding these activities. And the thing is, these products are advertised very widely on Facebook, on Instagram, in newspapers. So it's not really, they're sort of advertising them like a consumer product, like an ordinary kind of thing, when really they're meant for a specific niche of very wealthy people who know what they're getting into, kind of thing. So that's one of the big concerns about the environment that Du Val rose up in.
Yeah, so at the end of all of this, or whenever that may be, we might see some new regulations perhaps?
Well, there doesn't appear to be any political will for that.
Right.
And there are some people, a lot of people actually, who argue that we need this regime because it's a way for up-and-coming small businesses to raise money without all the regulation. So, because if they've got to go through a retail offer, the documentation is out of this world, and it is pretty difficult. If you're just a high-growth startup, for example, you've got a big idea, you need to raise some money. There are some well-heeled people out there who are willing to back you. If you've got to go through all the regulation of a retail offer, it would really slow you down. And so that's the idea. But it's just that it's supposed to be this, as I say, this small category of high net worth people who, use this regime. And in actual fact, what's happened is it seems to have spread out to a much wider group of Kiwis, and, some of them have been caught by it.
Now, talk to me about the directors or the Clarkes, right? They're quite flashy, eh?
Yeah, the Clarkes became sort of quite characters, I guess, in the business world. Again, you've got to remember that this is a South Auckland townhouse and apartment developer. So, pretty run-of-the-mill really, but the Clarkes themselves were not run-of-the-mill. They were prolific self-promoters. They made a reality TV series about themselves.
There was even a trailer for that.
There certainly was, yes. We've never seen the actual series. The statutory management happened, and it's not quite clear what actually happened to that reality TV series, but I understand it does exist.
My name is Kenyon Clarke. I've been developing property now for close to 27 years. I've been incredibly privileged to work alongside my wife, Charlotte.
At home, Kenyon is a big, cuddly bear when it comes to the children. At work, Kenyon is like a bull in a china store.
So it's never aired, but Kenyon Clarke was running property masterclasses. Charlotte Clarke was making videos online about, how to invest in property. They sponsored the Blues rugby franchise. They had a charitable foundation. They gave Christmas gift baskets to children, underprivileged families. So, they were really out there, sort of loud and proud. And that was kind of part of the marketing of Du Val, because they were wanting to sell houses off the plans, for one thing. A lot of property developers do that. They have to sell a certain amount of houses off the plans before they can get a project underway. So that's not uncommon. But they were sort of really out there hard selling. And then on the other side, they were wanting this investment that we were just talking about. They were having to bring in investment from investors into their funds to try and, bankroll effectively the projects that they were trying to get off the ground.
And in terms of buying off of plans, you mentioned that, that obviously happens. I would be terrified personally, but I also don't play the pokies or anything, so because I've just got the worst luck in the world. What was different, do you think, with their plans versus, have any of their houses been built?
Oh yes, they have done some developments, definitely. The most notable is the Lakewood Plaza Tower, which Aucklanders would know because it's a big, tall, 15-storey apartment tower just by the Manukau City interchange.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's the only big, tall apartment building there. So it's kind of a bit out of place. It's a bit of a landmark. And that was their flagship development. And that probably did give them quite a bit of credibility. People probably thought, well, if they can do that building, that they must be all right.
Yeah, that would give me second thought. Yeah.
They did have a lot of problems with it. It was 2 years late. They ended up in a huge big dispute with the construction company that they'd partnered with. That ended up in a $6.6 million settlement, which has still not been paid. And then there was a water pipe that burst on the 11th floor and flooded the building, creating huge damage, which took quite a long time to remedy. I think it's only recently been fully remedied.
Okay, I'm back to being terrified.
Yeah, so there were a lot of problems with that apartment building. But they did do others. There was the Mountain Vista Estate in Mangere, which is I think it's about 180 odd units. That is just about finished. It's been dragging on for an awful long time, but PwC, the statutory managers, have been finishing off the projects, and that one's due to be finished probably beginning of next year. And there were some others as well, but then there were others such as the Verge Apartments in Mount Wellington. Again, people might know them because you would see them as you go down the southern motorway. It's these twin tower apartments that are unfinished. They're sort of a skeleton kind of thing. And again, PwC are busy trying to sell that at the moment. So, they did do some developments. So there wasn't anything particularly different about them in that regard. But what kind of happened at that time, 2020, 2021, is we had this massive property boom. As we know, property prices went up this ridiculous 50%. And there are a whole set of reasons for that. But then they came crashing down again. And so if you had bought a house off the plans during that time, say you had agreed to pay $800,000 for a townhouse, and then suddenly the property market crashes, you have to go and settle on that property. It might only be worth $700,000 or $650,000. And so the bank says, hang on a minute, we are not going to lend you $800,000 or maybe whatever your deposit was, the equivalent of that, because it's not worth that now. And so you are stuck. You might have put down a 5% deposit or a 10% deposit on that property. You've got to then find the rest to pay for a property that is now no longer worth that. So that's what happened to quite a few people around the country at that time when we had this massive spike up and then a big fall.
What's the status of the Du Val group at the moment?
It's still in statutory management. That process will go on for quite some time. They're gradually working their way through it. They're gradually selling off the assets that there were there. What the end point will be, we don't know, because as we know, the Financial Markets Authority is still investigating Du Val. That's a parallel process. We don't know where they're at with that. No charges have been laid yet. So
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, to be clear, no charges have been laid against Du Val or the Clarkes regarding the collapse, and we don't know how that process will play out yet. The watchdog obviously keeps its cards very close to its chest. They don't tell us, so we don't know.
Are they accused of anything?
Not yet. No,
Right.
No, there have been no charges
So
laid.
just the presence of investigations at the moment is what makes this kind of like people scratch their heads.
Well, it was quite a dramatic sort of start, I guess, because you may have read in the news about how they raided their house in August 2024. We've never seen scenes like it, basically. This was a lovely house in leafy Victoria Avenue in Remuera. And next minute, you've got the FMA in flak jackets supported by police raiding the property first thing on a Friday morning and coming out with gun cases. The media were tipped off by locals and turned up to sort of see these scenes of all this kind of thing going on. So it's unprecedented. And so I guess that they kind of hit the headlines for that as well. And their passports have been seized. They're not allowed to leave the country, and all their assets have been seized while this process goes through. So it's got a way to play out yet.
And in terms of, they've not really gone to ground though, have they?
No, you couldn't say that. No, the Clarkes have always been pretty good at promoting themselves, and they're fairly active on social media. They have, they have their supporters and they have their say on social media, so that's fair enough. And as I say, we just don't know where this is going to finish yet.
So, of course, since August last year, we've seen a lot of coverage of the Clarkes and everything. They're in and out of court. They've even got the services of high-profile defence lawyer Ron Mansfield as well. What's all the legal activity about if no charges have been laid?
There's been quite a process to go through, and one of the big things was the asset preservation order, as it's called. So that was the order that the FMA got, seizing the Clarkes' assets and the assets of the Du Val business. So they needed to do that in order to kickstart the process. They got it, well, it gets a wee bit technical, but they got it under what was called a without notice basis, which basically means they kind of charged into the court. The court said, yes, okay. And then the Clarkes had to have their say. So that is an on-notice order. And so that hearing didn't happen until June because there was a lot of toing and froing. The Clarkes didn't have legal representation, and it took a while for that process to work its way through. That then did happen. The asset preservation order was reconfirmed, and so everything status quo remains, and the authorities continue to do their thing. But that had to happen first. The Clarkes contested it. They have also gone to quite long lengths to have all the details surrounding why those orders remain in place suppressed. so we can't talk about any of that. They are also fighting PwC because as the statutory managers, they want to speak to them. They want the clerks to come in for an interview, and they actually gained a court order that the clerks have to do that, but the clerks are fighting that as well. There was actually...
So just appealing, just appeal upon appeal.
Yes, there's a lot of appealing going on, and there was an appeal court hearing just a few weeks ago of the order that they should front up to PwC for an interview. They have been interviewed by the FMA, to be clear, that they can't really avoid that. But yeah, they are resisting going in to see PwC at this point in time. So we're waiting on the Court of Appeal's ruling on that. So yeah, there's a lot of legal toing and froing going on.
Why did you decide to do this investigation and this podcast series?
I've been covering Du Val since 2021. And I've crossed swords with the clerks quite a few times. They're quite combative, and they were very unhappy about a column that I wrote way back in 2021 where I talked about this new breed of property developer that had sprung up, making the use of this eligible investor exclusion, and just sort of pointing out that, possibly there's a few problems with this, which, the FMA was already onto. And they didn't like it, and they did sue my employer at the time, the NBR, National Business Review. The matter was settled in the end. The column remains online. But that kind of kicked things off. And so, and it wasn't just me, there were lots of other business journalists looking into them as well. And so we have continued to cover them. And as you say, they're just such characters. They sort of put themselves out there, all the things that they did. And so we've just kept on following the story. And it sort of became clear that something was going to happen, but we didn't realise it would be quite as dramatic as it was. We didn't think the government was going to bring out the big guns and
literally,
and appoint statutory managers. So that was one out of the box. But yes, it's been a fascinating story, and like we say, not over yet.
I believe it's important to ask yourself, how good can life get if I was free? I'm an advocate for your freedom. I'm an advocate for my family's freedom. The poverty cycle is generational, and so is the cycle of actually building generational wealth. I encourage you to be the first one in your family to make it out of the matrix and to lead the way for future generations.
So they haven't been charged with anything. We've seen them in and out of court, though, with Ron Mansfield, etc., etc. There have been allegations, though, and you've spoken to some people behind those allegations, right, for the podcast?
Yes, we've spoken to investors, a former employee, and yeah, they have said a lot of things about the way Du Val operated, and it's pretty interesting because it's kind of like the people who were at the coalface talking about how the group operated, and they have made a certain set of claims about, how things were done. We've put all this to the clerks, and so far they have declined to respond to us. But I think listeners will find it pretty interesting, just as I say, hearing from the coalface, the inside track of how this sort of pretty out there group operated and what the effect has been on some of those people who've been kind of left high and dry.
Have the clerks participated in interviews for the podcast?
No, they haven't. We've made quite a few offers to them, and we would love to talk to them. We really would, and the offer remains open. But at this point, they've declined, other than some statements that Kenyon Clarke has voluntarily given to us. But no, he has declined to sit down for an interview with the podcast. We are still hoping that he will, because, we really would like to hear their side of the story. It's a fascinating tale.
Yeah, and it's not all said and done as well. The episodes are being released weekly?
Yes, so we've got our first 2 episodes coming out on Monday the 1st, and then there'll be an episode a week for the following 3 weeks. But we really do hope this isn't the end of the story. We would like to speak to the clerks. And
well, there's plenty of time for them to come forward and speak to you.
There is. So, we do hope that happens.
Scary. I'd come and speak to you.
Good.
So you mentioned the series out, obviously, December 1st, the first 2 episodes. I cannot wait. And where can you find them?
All the usual places you get your podcasts, and obviously there will be links on the Herald site and Business Desk. And we had some support from the Brian Gaynor Investigative Journalism Initiative for this, so it will be free to anyone who wants to have a listen. So people may know that Brian Gaynor was an investment guy. He used to write for the Herald, and he founded Milford Asset Management, and he was really big on investigative journalism. And so as part of his legacy, there is this fund there that journalists can apply to for projects. And so So we applied for this one and they agreed, because one of the really important things we're trying to do with it is sort of throw it forward and look at why Kiwis keep getting attracted to these kind of maybe fringe property schemes, because it's not the first we've seen. They just keep popping up, really. And a lot of people are saying New Zealanders just need to get over this property thing. The property market is not going to look in the next few years how it has looked over the past maybe 30 years. The environment has changed, and we need to get out of this mindset that, bricks and mortar are the only thing you should put your money into, and become a bit more mature in the way we invest. And the Gainer Fund was really interested in trying to help maybe educate Kiwis a bit better.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Maria.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in on Monday for another look behind the headlines.